in the car park? Great. The format of the meeting will be the licensing officer will present their report, then we can ask questions of them. Then the applicant will submit their case, and then we can ask questions of them. And then any other person, it would be responsible authorities, but there are no responsible authorities objecting. So then any other person can present their case, and then they can be asked questions, and there'll be a summing up, and everybody gets a chance to sum up. And then you'll be asked to leave the room, where we'll retire and hopefully make a decision today. Well, hopefully in a short period of time, in which case you can wait or you can come back. You'll get notified in writing within 5 working days. Yeah, that's great. We'll introduce ourselves so we know who you are. Oh, about speaking, if you're not registered to speak, you can't speak. So only the people who are registered to speak can speak, but you're welcome to attend as you're all here and smile and clap and whatever. Okay, right, we're interested. Declarations of interest. I should declare that I do know one member of the committee, Zena Pollard, who I used to work with until 2010. Okay. Right. We'll get started. Would the licensing officer like to present their report? Introductions. Didn't I do introductions? No, I did it in my head. I'm Simon Carswell. I'm councillor for Street.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Simon Carswell, councillor for the eastern side of Taunton.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcus Crace. I'm councillor for the Dunster division, which is on the other side of the, well, almost in Wales, but it's not quite.
My name is Alex Kershaw-Moore. I'm a solicitor with the council, and it's my role today to act as legal advisor to the subcommittee.
Good morning. My name is Jack Godley. I'm the Senior Licensing and Business Support Officer.
Debbie Widows, Democratic Services Officer, here to take minutes.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, we'll now ask and welcome applicants and welcome Mr. Tornay online and everybody else who's online. Right, Jack, would you like to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. An application was submitted for a variation to the premises licence by the Alhampton Community Pub Limited on the 24th of April 2024. The application can be found at Appendix 1 within the bundle that you have, and the new plans in respect to the variation can be found at Appendix 2. The application is to create an external bar immediately adjoining the rear of the existing premises for the sale by retail of alcohol and to take food orders for customers using the decking and the lawns that surround the premises. The application states that this proposal is to alleviate congestion at the only bar within the premises, which is small and would generally improve public safety and the customer experience. There are no changes to the current licensable hours, and the current license can be found at Appendix 3. A map showing the premises and adjacent properties can be found at Appendix 4, and a photograph of the proposed external bar and location can be found at Appendix 5. The Alhampton Inn closed in November 2022 as a commercial business. In 2023, a small group of residents set up a community benefit society and raised £120,000 from 130 shareholders to take on a 15-year lease for the pub. Alhampton is a small village of 70 houses, and about 2/3 of residents are shareholders and use the pub regularly. It is a traditional wet pub. And there is no other premises or shop in the village. The business is broadly breaking even financially, but needs to be able to make better use of its assets to ensure its long-term survival. The reason for referral to the licensing subcommittee is a representation has been received from one other person against the application in relation to the prevention of Public Nuisance Licensing Objective and can be found at Appendix 5. This application also received 30 letters, emails of support for the application, 25 of which are a signed template letter, and 5 of the emails were submitted by members of the Management Committee. Therefore should be considered as the applicant. An overview of support for the application can be found at Appendix 6. No representation has been made by any responsible authority, but the police have requested some conditions to be added to the licence if granted, which have been agreed by the applicant and can be found at Appendix 7. With regards to the representation made by Mr. Torday, it does mention in there that a complaint was made to this authority in 2021 in relation to noise issues and the structure that was built at the front of the pub. This was during the COVID epidemic, where a marquee was put at the front of the pub, along with the, in accordance with the regulations at the time for the COVID emergency. This was investigated by one of my team, and Mr. Torday was fully updated and didn't wish to take any further action. That concludes my report at this present time, Chair.
Thank you, Jack. I'll go to members of the subcommittee first if they've got any questions for Jack.
No, it's quite a comprehensive report, not from me at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant have any questions of the licensing officer? So I forgot to ask your names. Roger and Lynn. Do you mind if I call you Roger and Lynn? Thank you. Mr. Tornay, did you have any questions of the licensing officer?
It's Torday. No, I don't have any questions. That's very clear. Thank you.
Apologies.
That's all right.
Okay, thank you. I'll now ask the applicant to present their case.
Thank you. The applicant, as you've heard, is the Alhampton Community Pub Limited, and I'm one of the 12 members of the managing committee. Firstly, some background. The Alhampton Inn has existed as a pub in our village for 200 years, and until the previous owner closed it without warning in November of 2022. Now, that left a fairly large hole in the centre of our community, and a huge effort was mounted in the village to get the pub reopened. Firstly, we worked with the parish council to list it as an asset of community value, which gave us time to raise the money. We couldn't afford to buy the freehold, but we managed to find a benevolent investor who was prepared to buy the freehold and give us a lease. We then formed a community benefit society to actually run the pub and take on the lease. And that society has 130 or so shareholders, as you've heard, and everyone who is a shareholder gets one vote regardless of the amount that they invested. That's the way the community benefit societies run. We opened again in August 2023, but that was after a lot of cleaning, painting, furniture restoration, gardening, landscaping, and lots of other work, which was all done by volunteer villagers, many of whom are here. Our management committee of village, which is made up of villagers, oversees the operations of the pub, but we employ an experienced manager who then employs bar staff and support staff, and our manager is here as well. We are not just a pub, but a social centre where everyone is welcomed. Now, an example of this is that there are single people in the village of a certain age who are also women. It's very important for them to have a place to come to and socialise, and they say that the pub has never been so welcoming, safe, and accessible as it is under the current structure. We've got many growing social activities that happen at the pub. We've got quiz nights, French conversations nights, bridge classes, book clubs, lots going on. The demographic is very mixed. We've got local workers who come in after work. We have the barber's farming operation and cheesemaking operation in the village. We have the Nichols stables. Families come in with children, particularly when we're serving pizza from the food trucks and the pop-up offerings that we have. The club members come in for their activities. Many families come in, particularly on sunny weekends. At the Bath and West show this year, we won the Prince of Wales Award for Community Initiatives, of which the judges said that the Alhampton Inn represents a rescue project for a very rural village with no other amenities. It provides a community hub for all members of all ages within this area. So why are we applying for a variation? The premises license that we inherited allows drinks to be served only from the small bar directly inside the front door, and this gets very congested, and it's just too cramped for comfort and efficient service. The only change to the license that we're seeking is to allow us to serve drinks when necessary upstairs where we have a dining and meeting space, and outside in the back garden where we wish to serve from an outside lockable enclosed bar, which will also serve as a storage unit. We have a small wooden terrace at the front, but the back garden where the bar is to be located is a large south-facing secluded garden. It's a great green space which has always been popular in the summer. It's got easy access from the car park and is a space where children can play with their parents while they're at the pub. We need the outside bar to be used when required to alleviate the overcrowding at the current bar and allow customers to order drinks without coming inside into the melee. The chosen location for the bar is directly adjacent to the existing cellar to allow us to make all the connections for the service of beers and so on. The proposed variation is not going to change the way that we use the pub. The pub garden is already in extensive use and has been for many years for customers, family, and for holding village events such as fetes, dog shows, village celebrations such as the 10-year anniversary for the Haddon Wood. Having the extra bar outside will not change this use, but it will dramatically improve our ability to serve the customers at these events. So turning to the support for our application and the single objection, before I say anything else, I want to make it clear that we are a small, close community, and in no way do we want anything we do to be adversarial. We're all friends and neighbours as well as customers at the pub. We want to work with everyone, and we told all the immediate neighbours in advance of our intention to apply for this variation. You will have seen the number of representations from our villagers in support, including from immediate neighbours, and I think that is backed up by the fact that we have neighbours and villagers here today. There's just the one objection, as you know, from a neighbour whose property's nearest windows are more than 20 metres from the pub garden, and there's the separation through the large and thick laurel hedge. He bought a house next to a pub, it has to be said, and it was bought from the previous owner of the pub, who had actually extended his garden towards the pub. There have been no objections from any of the other neighbours with properties adjoining the pub, but in fact there has been support. Thank you very much. The objection is on the grounds that there will be a legitimate case of public nuisance. Well, that's hypothetical, and if such circumstance did arise, objectors have process and remedies to deal with that circumstance. There may have been historic problems under previous ownership, but our community management team is not the same as those more commercially focused operations. There have certainly been no complaints since we took over. Our management committee is formed of villagers, so we are run by and answerable to our neighbours. We already have strict policies, procedures and controls which are well documented, and they will continue to remain in place for activities both inside and outside the pub. Those policies, along with our training plans, assure that we meet the licensing objectives, including those relating to public nuisance. We have our own charter setting out when customers will be refused service or banned. And we have willingly accepted every one of the conditions that the police have asked for, such as the CCTV, staff training for Challenge 25, and so on. We have signage asking customers to leave the premises quietly. And on a personal note, I've been involved in the senior management of many companies, and I have to say, I think the policies and procedures we have at the pub are probably better and more thorough than any I've ever worked with. There's been a suggestion that we could add a new permanent building in the back garden, a fully enclosed extension to the pub. That would detract from the garden, and basically it's not just isn't feasible for us to consider that. We're not the freeholders of the property. We have only a 15-year lease. We might not get our landlord's permission, and we may not get planning permission, and so on. In any event, our financial situations means that we have not got the funds to go ahead with such a thing. Our landlord has already paid for roof repairs and is now installing new windows and doors for us. He's been exceptionally generous, but if there was a full extension, that would fall completely to us. Finally, I want to point out that the outside bar is actually a commercial necessity for us. The pub has experienced a succession of landlords over recent years, and none of them has been able to sustain a profitable business. The difference between making money and staying open and losing money and being forced to close are very small. Typically, British wet pubs lose money through the winter, with the exception of Christmas, of course. So to be viable for our community, we have to make money in the summer. And we have to be able to serve successfully in order to compete. That is why we need the external bar. We're operating in a competitive market just in our own parish. Higher Farm in Sutton is opening a bar, the Manor House in Ditchett is reopening with keen new owners, and the Wraxall Vineyard has its wine bar operations. We need to be competitive, and the ability to serve our customers quickly and efficiently is critical to achieving that. We pay professional front of house staff because we think that to be good practice, but it also allows proper training so that so that we have staff who can deal with issues such as excessive noise in the garden. So this variation is about helping us to keep the pub open, to continue with what the judges of the Prince of Wales Award called a rescue project. The business is making a small profit at the moment, mostly because of our volunteers, and possibly because the manor is actually shut at the moment. We have to retain our customers, and all we want to achieve by this variation is to better serve existing and future customers in a safe, responsible and controlled way in spaces that our customers already use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. Lynn, did you want to say anything?
No, nothing further, thank you.
Thank you. Right, we'll go straight on to questions of the panel. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm sure I heard you say and remember from conversation with you yesterday that you have a varying food offer, and I believe I'm right in saying that it's a Friday night and you have different types of food available on different Fridays. Will that be going through the winter as well as the summer, or is that just a summer activity?
We had the pop-up offering, as we call it, on Tuesdays, Fridays, and then sometimes barbecues on Sundays. We ran that as long as we could, but inevitably the weather took over, and around about November, it just became untenable to stay outside. So it is very weather dependent as it moves into winter. But we do have upstairs where people can sit and eat in the winter. So I would not envisage there would be any use of the garden simply because people can't survive outside and eat in the winter.
Thanks for that. What I was trying to get at is what's the winter offering? Because if you're using the upstairs to serve food and have events, be that a French conversation evening, an Italian conversation evening, or wine tasting, whatever it is you want to hold there, that will entail the use of the premises. I'm trying to get to the amount of use you're going to have during the winter, which will sustain you during the summer.
But we are trying to fill every evening that we can with something, be it a pop-up outside that brings people to the pub, or a society or club having something going on. We're trying to have people pulled to the pub every night that we possibly can as part of trying to make it both a community venture and profitable.
Okay, thank you for that.
Marcus?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Roger, for again another quite comprehensive statement, and really not much room for too many questions because none needed. The only question I have is you say obviously that the garden currently is used quite well by people obviously who brought their drinks inside and taken them outside, and what we have got. My question would be is how busy does that garden get? And have you, since you've been doing that, had any complaints from neighbours, and how you've dealt with them?
As far as I'm aware, we've had no complaints from neighbours. It is highly weather dependent, And we are relatively new kids on the block, so it does vary quite a lot, but we are seeing a steady increase as our reputation spreads, which obviously helps our profitability.
And also you said about people being banned. I'm just curious, have you actually had to ban anyone from your premises?
No, I'm sorry, I'm looking at our landlord and getting confirmation. No.
Thank you, Marcus. I'll just ask a couple of questions. When the pub was formerly run, was it a tenanted pub or a freeholder run? I'm just curious as regard, because profitability is very hard with tied pubs and tenanted pubs nowadays. Can you answer that?
I think if we went a long way back, it was owned by a brewery, but certainly in recent times, it's been freehold.
Thank you. And how do you perceive noise levels will increase with the external bar?
I don't think it's going to make any difference whatsoever.
Thank you. And just to clarify, you've applied to license the upstairs area, which I think was formerly residential and therefore wasn't included in the original licensed area. What do you do now as regards sale of alcohol upstairs, and what do you plan to do?
At the moment, there's no provision upstairs whatsoever. So again, all drinks have to be served in the bar downstairs along with the customers downstairs. Drinks have to be carried up and down those stairs, which isn't ideal. What we want to have is the facility that if a particular group was meeting upstairs, or we were serving food sometime in the future upstairs, we'd like the facility for a small bar in a corner, say, to serve bottles of wine or whatever to tables, rather than people coming up and down.
And one final question. Obviously, you're aware there's one objector. Have you approached Mr. Torday at all to
There's
discuss
been
it?
multiple conversations this week and all the time since the application, before the application was made, since the application was made, right up to the conversations yesterday.
Thank you. If there's no more questions from the subcommittee, I'll go to legal licensing officer. No. Mr. Torday, do you have any questions of the applicant?
No, none from me, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. We'll now ask Mr. Torday to present his case.
Hello. Well, I can't actually see who's here from the community because I'm facing the wrong way. But anyway, it's a slight disadvantage to me because I can't actually see who's there. But look, I'm
Just to confirm, Mr. Torday, I think there's 8 members of the public I can see who. Plus
it's fine. It's fine. Look, I'm slightly embarrassed that it has come to this, to a sort of formal hearing. I was very keen to try and sort of resolve things with the committee. So the first thing I want to say is, I am a supporter of the pub. I drink in there quite regularly, and I'm very impressed by what the committee have achieved in reinvigorating it as a key hub of the community. My only concern is with the noise and the impact that it has on my family, and this has been an ongoing challenge. And Roger made the point, sort of, which I've heard quite a few times, which I think is slightly disingenuous, that he chose to buy a property next to a pub. Well, yeah, no, I did, and I accept that. But the noise late at night, bear in mind, that's really the only sort of problematic window. And just as recently, and I spoke with Jack about this, as last Friday, my kids were kept up until 11 o'clock at night by noise emanating from the garden. So it can be problematic, albeit only in that latter part of the evening. So the conversations that I've been having with Jeremy Burks was just some consideration in the license conditions around stuff later at night, in an effort to sort of try and resolve this amicably. And those conditions were that the bar, the external bar, would close at a certain time. That was actually Jeremy's suggestion, not mine, that the external bar would close at 9 p.m. every night. And that there was a separate condition, and I took advice from Jack on this, that there would be another, that, you know, drinking in the garden after a certain time would also be restricted, which again I don't think is unreasonable. Like, I get everything that Roger's said. I agree with. I get why they want to expand capacity, but I don't think this should be done at the expense of, you know, and it's been made quite clear to me that I am the sole objector in this, which doesn't make me feel great. And I know there's all this chat of it being non-adversarial, but it does make me feel slightly singled out in that regard. But, you know, this is our home. My kids are my kids. They are genuinely kept up late at night by disturbance from the pub. And so I'm just trying to find a reasonable solution that, if in the event, and I know you can't speak in hypotheticals in these cases, Roger says, oh, it'll have no material impact on noise. Well, of course it will. So I was keen to find a reasonable solution whereby there were just some conditions in place in the latter part of the evening. And when I spoke, I tried to chat with Lynn about this. Well, I did chat with Lynn about this yesterday. She said, again, not unreasonably, that there were concerns that, you know, conditions on the license would be sort of universal and would mean they wouldn't be able to do special events. Now, the irony, I'm sure, is not lost on the public attending and the committee that I play in a local band. The band have played at the pub and may well play there again if we're asked to do so. So there will be events, and I think as a neighbour, I'm, you know, supportive and accepting of those. For me, it's more that sort of just ongoing day to day, when people are out in the garden and they've had a few drinks, the noise control goes, and that can impact on our lives. And that's all I'm really trying to legislate against with, you know, with raising these concerns. So what I would submit, and Roger made the point that the capital isn't available. I always thought, actually, you know, given how bad the weather is, particularly in Somerset recently, that building an external extension with an internal bar would increase capacity and revenue generation year round. Now, it might be that the capital requirements just aren't there to be able to do that. So, you know, in summary, I was hoping with my conversations with Jeremy that we could reach some sort of amicable agreement just on that window later in the evening. And I maintain that position. But look, everything Roger said, if I'm really honest, is reasonable. And, you know, it is a community venture that is rightfully been recognised. And as I said, I'm a fan of it. So I am slightly embarrassed that it's come to this point. I was hoping we would be able to resolve it between ourselves. But I do maintain my position that some consideration around the conditions just later at night would be my position as the immediate neighbour to the garden.
Thank you very much. I should mention, so you're aware, Mr. Tory, I think there's 2 Somerset councillors. One. That shows I don't. Yeah, Claire Sully is in the room as well, as part of the 8. Thank you. Right. Questions of the objector, Simon.
Thank you. Yes, I understand the point you're making about noise from the garden in the evening, but I'm struggling a little bit with, if you were to close the bar at 9 outside, the outside bar at 9, unless you then try and restrict the people in the garden, they will still be out in the garden until closing time, as is perfectly reasonable with licensed premises. So I'm not utterly convinced that closing the bar at 9 outside will have the desired effect, because people will be perfectly entitled to sit in the garden in the hopefully late summer sunshine, enjoying their meal and their drinks. So I'm not utterly convinced that a 9 o'clock close will achieve what you think it might, or what you hope it might achieve. I think it would be difficult for any landlord, any organisation, to be able to control noise from patrons, whether the bar is open in the garden or whether they have to go back inside to get another glass of beer or a bottle of wine or whatever. So were you hoping that by closing the bar outside at 9, that would limit the amount of noise coming from the garden, assuming for the sake of this discussion that it's a nice warm summer's evening, and people are outside enjoying a glass of beer or a glass of wine or whatever, with a meal or a snack?
Yes, that was the thinking behind it. But as I said, that suggestion came from Jeremy as a point of discussion for us, and I thought it seemed reasonable. So that was in lieu of my original objection being, couldn't you build an extension with an internal bar, which would resolve really all of these challenges and be a more sustainable long-term business plan? So yeah, I do believe it would limit the potential for increased noise impact in the evenings. So yeah, I think it's not an unreasonable condition, but of course I'm open to a discussion around that with the management committee about what they deem to be an acceptable time for that to happen.
Before Simon asks another question, can I just clarify who Jeremy is?
Maybe I can answer that, Chair. Jeremy Burks is the chairman of the management committee of 12 of us. He unfortunately is working in France this week and is unable to attend.
Thank you. Simon, do you have another question?
Jeremy is the member of the management committee who I personally know best, and we have maintained a dialogue throughout this, trying to come to some sort of amicable resolution.
Thank you. Marcus, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you. Comprehensive and well-made points and statement. I suppose, I think we've already talked about the time and what difference that would make. You talked about the noise keeping children awake. Since the new, I'm trying to think of the name of the since the community benefit, that was it. Community benefit society has been controlling and in control of the license and the premises. How many times would you say that's happened over the last year or etc.? How long has it been open? Yes, since they've been in control.
August.
I would say, in all honesty, probably on a handful of occasions. And that the management, I have no issue with the management. The management of the pub is good. They are respectful. It's the potential for this to increase, which I again appreciate, is, well, I don't think it is suppositional, because we have had terrific problems in the past. Now, you could argue that that's a management issue, but I do also think it is hard for staff to really control that in the latter parts of the evening, and having a condition on license where they're really obliged to ask drinkers in the external environment to come inside would be a very helpful sort of guardrail to just ensure there isn't those problems in the latter part of the evening. But again, I would commend the current management. They are running the place in a respectful manner. It's just, I do not agree with this supposition that having the external bar will not create additional noise. It clearly will.
Thank you. Also, one other question on this, and have you? I mean, because of course at the moment people can go out there and take their beers out there when they bought them from the bar inside. Have you had any conversations about restricting people doing this as of yet under their current licence terms?
Have I had any conversations about that?
Yes.
No, not until these conversations that I've been having with Jeremy. Yeah, no.
That's all my questions at the moment.
Thank you. Just one question, which is the same question I've asked the applicant. How do you feel noise levels will increase with the external bar compared to what they are now?
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
Yeah, I feel noise levels will increase exponentially with, you know, an external bar. I think it doesn't take, you know, it's not a rocket science calculation. So it will only serve to increase the potential for that becoming problematic. But you know, having reflected on it, having had the conversations with Jeremy, wanting the pub to succeed, all I'm really asking for, now that we've got to this point, is some consideration for the very latter parts of the evening, that there are some restrictions to try and ameliorate that.
Thank you. Are there any questions from legal or the licensing officer?
Not for Torday, no.
The applicant, do you have any questions of Mr. Torday? No? Thank you very much.
Do you, however, think we need to do an extra step?
Okay. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think this is perhaps a little bit out of normal proceedings, but in effect, Mr. Torday has submitted 2 conditions to the licensing subcommittee. Mr. Hutton, I think we need to hear your response to those conditions. I don't know whether you were aware that they were being discussed, but obviously, as you are here to speak for the applicant.
Could I please add before Roger responds to that? Could I ask a question?
It depends who you want to ask it of, Mr. Torday. Go ahead.
Well, of you, of the experts.
Okay.
You guys. So, and this is something I spoke to Lynn about yesterday. Is there a situation whereby there is a condition in place, let's say 9 o'clock or whatever, but that condition can be adjusted subject to, or can be exempted subject to special events such as celebrations, fates, or whatever? Or is it a sort of universal thing that needs to be adhered to?
Okay.
That was part of a conversation Lynn and I had yesterday.
We are getting slightly into hypotheticals, and I'm a lawyer. I don't like hypotheticals. The committee can impose whatever conditions it feels are appropriate, necessary, and based on the evidence. So they could issue a condition that says the bar has to be closed at 9 p.m. and everybody has to be indoors by 9:30. They could impose a condition that says it gets a little bit more complicated, because then it's how do you define the times when that doesn't apply? But it's not impossible. But I think partly that is why we need to hear from the applicant. Okay, does that help?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. You've got a question now.
Can I respond to that?
Absolutely.
I think we, as a committee, are adamant that we would absolutely not. We would prefer this not to go to condition. We have a license, and we don't think we're really making a significant. There's no need to substantially change that license. I hope you've heard that we are communicative. We talk to Nick Torday all the time, as you've heard, through more than one person. We have lots of policies, procedures, and we would far rather that we sit down with the objector, with Nick, and make sure that we've got robust policies and procedures, that he can be part of the drafting, and that we do this as an internal matter, rather than it being forced on us by condition. And even better, later this year at our AGM, the committee is up for re-election. Of course, Mr. Torday could put himself forward to help run the pub and be part of the forming of the conditions if he so desired.
Thank you. I think Marcus has got an additional question.
Yeah, thank you. It was on that, and maybe I should have, and remiss of me, I should have asked it before. What we've gone back onto that subject, it's probably a good time to ask it. You talked about special events, and I think Mr. Torday talked about being in a band and playing at the pub as well. How many special events a year do you actually have? I mean, is it 5? Is it 20? Is it 1 a week?
They vary from very small gatherings in the garden to a whole village turning out for a massive fete or celebration and people coming in. Our gardens in the village are infamous as one of the great places to go on open garden weekend. And we put on a hog roast and the hog, it disappears in no time. So it varies a lot. It's very hard to answer the question. I would suggest in total 10, a dozen.
Thank you for that.
And just if I may add to that, I guess one of the reasons why I've just pointed out the huge variety of things we do. And that again is where we would prefer not to be bound by condition, but putting our own bounds on through communication with our neighbours and friends for each event.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to mention that under the existing terms or any agreed new terms of the licence, anyone can ask for a review of the licence at any time. Right, we'll move on now to Mr. Torday. Do you wish to sum up your case?
Yeah, I think, look, I've heard everything that Roger and his colleagues have to say. It doesn't seem I feel it's slightly, again, I've been trying to do the running on this to try and come to some sort of reasonable conclusion. And look, he's right. Ultimately, we can just sit down and talk about the management practices, but it's it is incumbent on me as the homeowner right next to the pub to also think about the long-term impacts this will have on our lives. And I don't think the conditions that I'm asking for are unreasonable, but I haven't heard any counter, other than the conversations I had with Jeremy last week, any sort of counter suggestion on, no, we don't think that's reasonable, but this might be workable. It's just a sort of blanket, no, we don't want any condition on license, which is disappointing, but I have to respect that decision. So in summary, I still believe that some sort of condition, just to protect that latter part of the evening and have an enforceable condition whereby we can mitigate noise from the pub garden, would be most amenable. But I completely respect and accept whatever the view of the committee turns out to be.
Thank you very much. Would the applicant like to sum up?
The application is really all about us having the ability to trade profitably and serve our community. We don't think the additional bar is that substantial a change. We hear everything that our neighbours say. We always are listening, and we would much prefer this to be done through an informal agreement with the pub management committee rather than through a condition.
Thank you very much. Licensing officer, would you sum up, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things just like to just to clarify that's been brought up. In the event of any events or events that they might put on at the premises, if there were conditions preventing that, then they could always apply for a temporary event notice, which is £21. And you could then put forward the event that you're going to do for that particular that day in question. Also, the chair did touch on it there in relation to the review process. The Licensing Act makes way for any person or responsible authority to call a review of a premises licence if one of the 4 licensing objectives are not being met. And that is the prevention of crime and disorder, the prevention of public nuisance, public safety, and the prevention of harm to children. That could be done at any time, but we do need to have evidence in relation to that to actually call the review forward. That is a protection, really, for any person, and also for the responsible authorities to make sure that premises are run in good order. The other thing I'd just like to point out, and just to clarify, is in relation to complaints for this particular premises, there have been no complaints that we have received since this management team has taken over. The decision-making process by the licensing subcommittee, that they must consider this application on its own merits and the information contained within the application and this report. Members are reminded that the duty of the licensing authority is to take steps necessary to promote the licensing objectives in the interests of the wider community. The licensing objectives, as I stated earlier, are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, protection of children from harm. In its decision-making process, the Licensing Subcommittee must have regard to the Licensing Act 2003 and subsequent amendments, the statutory guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, Somerset Council's statement of licensing policy. The policy is available on request and from the Somerset Council website. The option available to the committee are as follows. Grant the application with no modifications and only attach conditions as required by the 2003 Act. Those are mandatory conditions. These shall and consistent with the operating schedule. There are some conditions that the police have asked for in relation to this application, which have been agreed by the applicant, and they're contained within the pack, the agenda pack, for you all to see. The subcommittee, they should be mindful to attach conditions if they wish to attach conditions to the licence. They must only do so if they are appropriate, necessary and proportionate, precise, clear and unambiguous, practical, realistic and enforceable, non-duplicative or existing statutory requirements or offences, modern and fit for purpose. Consideration must also be given to the number of conditions being attached. The licensing authority recognises that most licence holders seek to follow the law, and any enforcement action will normally follow a graduated approach, and in the first instance will include education and support. Whether licence holders continue to flout the law or act irresponsibly, firm action will be taken. There is also a right of appeal, but that will be read out as part of the decision notice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jack. Right, that concludes the public part of the process. We'll ask you all to leave the room in order that, or we're going to leave the room.
It's up to you, Chair, do you want?
We'll ask you all to leave the room in order that we can reach a decision. Hopefully we shouldn't be too long, but I can't say. If you wish to wait, you can do and hear the decision, or you will be notified within 5 working days. Thank you all for attending. In a way, I'm disappointed this has had to come to a subcommittee, but that's how things happen. But thank you all for your attendance anyway, and thank you online.